When we look back at the decade that was the teens, from start to end we've witnessed an incredible transformation. So much of this driven from advances in technology, the rise in data, arguably the smartphone and 3G being the foundation of so much change. But at the same time the demographic has shifted. Millennials have now surpassed the Gen Xers as the largest part of our labour force. So it's fair to say technology plus changing demographic has had a profound effect on our world. Our vision for the 2020s piece looks to capture a moment in time of what we think could be. Now this whole piece comes heavily caveated in that when we sat down to discuss this with a great bunch of people across Hydrock, COVID wasn't a thing. So it just goes to show how quickly a prediction can be totally derailed. But nonetheless, hopefully COVID has simply accelerated our ideas. So here it is, a brief overview of what life could look like when you wake up on January the 1st, 2030. Buildings. We have a housing crisis. We have a climate crisis. With buildings producing nearly half of the world's carbon emissions, these two are deeply intertwined. From a new build perspective, we see the groundswell of modular really taking hold during the 20s. Tied into this, we expect the high quality of design and factory conditions that modular promises to drive the environmental credentials of these new builds to passive house standards and potentially beyond. 80% of the buildings that will exist by the year 2050 have already been built. Demolishing our existing stock becomes a much greater carbon burden on our environment. So you can probably see where this is taking us. The era of the eco-retrofit will emerge. The Hudge pension funds will perform better for investing in development that does good by the people and the environment. Developers who don't want to get involved in this ESG malarkey will find that the money they can borrow becomes expensive and in fact realise over time that they can actually make more money by delivering quality with a longer term view. We anticipate that over the next 10 years, the single-use building types, the build it cheap, build it quick mentality will start to shift. Longevity in assets through long-term flexibility will grow in value. Placemaking in communities. All the greatest developments in recent times have started out with the intention of not simply building, but creating a destination. Many developers can be reluctant to delve too far into their pockets for the space between the buildings, as they see that this makes a dent in their profit margins. For the enlightened ones, however, they pave the way, setting trends and delivering the greatest returns. But even at this cutting edge, we believe we're about to see the next step. In a world of digital, data analytics, and ever-growing online community, these platforms will start to be used to engage with stakeholders and understand what they want from their neighbourhoods. So will this be the age of democratised planning and our most connected decision-making yet? Will we see developments that place environmental and social credentials at its heart be the ones that excel in terms of returning greatest value? For many years, Section 106 of planning has driven developers to provide facilities such as schools, usually begrudgingly, but imagine if developers started shifting their master plans with a centre for employment and skills focused on creating innovative new startups. And they build some housing and development space too. But seriously, will this really happen? Well, yeah, we think so. As testament to this planned shift to digital, this year the planning system is embarking on its first steps of a major overhaul. This could well facilitate one of the biggest impacts we see towards the end of the decade. And back to the demographic. We see a greater number of people from a wider variety of backgrounds entering the professional world of the built environment. With them, they'll bring a more diverse view on shaping our world, providing easier access to all parts of our society. Transport. Well, hasn't this had a COVID-19 shake-up? Would you have had the bravery to suggest to your key client that rather than attend a workshop in person that they were paying for, that instead that you were going to dial in over Teams? Well, didn't we all just go and have our hands forced on that one? Well, prior to COVID, the transport conundrum looked very complicated. It's not to suggest it's easy now, but what we have demonstrated is that behaviours can change when given the right reasons. If we look at some other factors that are at play, technology, demographic, again we see electric vehicles really owning the roads. As we speak, the government are talking about bringing the fossil fuel ban forward from 2040 to 2030. In 2009, Uber was launched in San Francisco, but it took 6 months to the middle of 2010 for the first ever trip to happen. 2015, 1 billion trips made. 2017, 5 billion trips. 2018, 10 billion trips made. At what point will it be cheaper and more convenient to entirely use taxi apps than own a car? Well, arguably right now. And of course, the biggest tech step, driverless cars. Will we see these happening during 2020s? On a mass scale? Well, we suspect they will certainly grow in presence, but we're not sure they'll simply replace the existing cars that we see now. Their ownership, their charging, their patterns of operation, the options, it'll all change. And again, demographic. In those becoming young adults, the uptake in provisional licenses is dropping. The mindset is shifting. Turning 17 no longer means that one thing of license, car, freedom. But if we step away from the personal car, what's happening in the logistics sector? COVID has driven our e-commerce habits higher than ever. More delivering, more distribution. We know we're moving away from fossil fuels, but does that mean everything goes battery powered? What about hydrogen? Well, perhaps we're on the cusp of a Betamax VHS showdown. As the M25 builds a loop of hydrogen filling stations, and Sweden already has charging rails below its first electrified road. You'd be a brave person to call where this one will be in 2030. However, what we can say is, we won't be filling up large tanks with petroleum-based fossil fuels. Energy and environment. Climate emergency is perhaps the order of the decade, with almost 70% of all UK councils having signed up as of February this year. This is going to be a considerable challenge due to arguably an underinvestment in our infrastructure. Both our gas and electrical networks are creaking. Over the next decade, we expect the content of our gas delivered to shift away from natural gas to hydrogen. From an electrical perspective, in August 19 we saw a considerable outage of 2 large gas-fired power stations. This resulted in trains grinding to a halt and hospitals running on critical backup power. Will we see more and more of these blackouts and their less severe sibling, the brownout? What we know for sure is that as the last of our coal comes off the grid in 2025, and as renewables continue to surge, our grid will become less carbon intensive. But this still leaves a shortage of storage capacity. This will generate a huge opportunity in the energy storage sector to enable our grid to be smooth and to remove stress. Perhaps what's really interesting though is how power can be stored and sold by us, the public. It's likely not far away, but apps and platforms whereby you can take energy off the grid overnight when it's cheap, or in fact you are sometimes paid to take it and then store it in electric vehicles and batteries and sell it back to the grid at times of stress. How energy is created, stored, bought and sold is going to see a revolution in the next 10 years. So there we have it, a quick canter through some of the ideas and thoughts for what lays ahead. Our vision for the 2020s document is a really beautiful piece and well worth a read. So thank you for listening, and please continue the conversation.